It is the morning of May 21st, 1941. The ground around Maleme airfield is strewn with wrecked gliders, burned-out transport planes, and the bodies of paratroopers from the desperate fighting of the previous day. German units hold a fragile perimeter, digging in among vineyards and stone walls, while others clear enough debris from the runway to make it usable. Hill 107, abandoned overnight by its New Zealand defenders, was now in German hands, commanding the strip below. At first light, the next stage begins. Junkers transports circle in and land one after another, bringing in the leading elements of General Julius Ringel's 5th Mountain Division. Unlike the scattered Fallschirmjäger, these Gebirgsjäger arrive in order, armed and organized, steadily reinforcing the German bridgehead. Yet the battle is not settled. To the east, New Zealand and Maori battalions are assembling for a counterattack, supported by a handful of British Matilda tanks. Their objective? Drive the Germans from Maleme before the mountain troops can entrench. The decisive struggle for Crete is about to begin. By the evening of May 20th, the German airborne assault on Crete teetered on the brink of failure. Across all landing zones, the Fallschirmjäger had suffered shocking losses. In the Maleme sector, they had failed to capture their principal objective, the airfield, and were locked in confused, close-range engagements with New Zealand defenders. Worse, much of the Sturm Regiment's leadership had been lost. Colonel Eugen Meindl was critically wounded, Major Scherber was killed, and Major Koch lay incapacitated. The survivors, bloodied and disoriented, dug into makeshift positions along the Tavronitis River and the olive groves west of Hill 107, awaiting what they believed would be a New Zealand counterattack at dawn. Many expected to be overrun. The Sturm Regiment had begun the operation with just under 1,900 men. By the morning of May 21st, an estimated 400 were killed and several hundred more wounded or missing. Total effectives in the Maleme sector likely numbered 1,000 or fewer, drawn from scattered remnants of the 1st and 3rd Battalions. German positions west of Hill 107 were disorganized, but formed around 3 focal points: the Tavronitis Bridge, the flat riverbed near the coast road, and a ruined olive grove. Each group was under local NCO control, with makeshift defensive lines built from sandbags, aircraft wreckage, and overturned gliders. One German soldier later described the night as the longest of my life, with flares occasionally illuminating twisted bodies and smouldering wreckage scattered across the olive groves. Ammunition was down to a handful of rounds per man in some sections, and many paratroopers had not eaten for over 24 hours. Communications were in chaos. Runners sent to locate unit commanders often never returned. In Athens, General Kurt Student faced his own crisis. Reports from the field were grim. None of the key airfields had been secured, and paratroop formations had been decimated. The Luftwaffe High Command urged that the operation be called off, but Student gambled. He believed that control of Maleme was still possible and that it was essential. Victory, he reasoned, could still be salvaged if reinforcements could be flown into Crete. He made 2 decisions. First, he summoned Colonel Hermann Bernhard Ramke, a Freikorps veteran with a reputation, to take command of the shattered Sturm Regiment at Maleme. Second, he redirected all available airborne reserves from the Heraklion front, stripping those units to reinforce the west. This gamble would leave the other sectors vulnerable, but Student considered the risk worthwhile. Maleme, with its airstrip and access to the western part of the island, was the linchpin of the campaign. The decision to reinforce Maleme over Heraklion was met with resistance among some of Student's staff, who feared that the remaining isolated pockets around Heraklion and Rethymno would be overrun. But Student remained firm. Maleme first, the rest later, he reportedly told his staff. That evening, confusion reigned among the defenders. Lieutenant Colonel Leslie Andrew of the New Zealand 22nd Battalion had withdrawn his headquarters and reserve from Hill 107 under the cover of darkness, convinced that his forward companies had been overrun. Due to a breakdown in field telephone lines and a lack of functioning radio equipment, he was unable to establish direct contact with C and D companies. In reality, Captain Campbell's D Company on the Tavronite slopes and C Company scattered between the edges of the airfield and slopes of the hill were still holding. C Company had fought off multiple probing attacks from German troops, primarily survivors from the 3rd Battalion of the Sturm Regiment, trying to infiltrate across the open ground. They held the olive groves east of the airfield, maintaining visual contact with the runway, and inflicted heavy casualties on German units attempting to link up with the riverbed position. Campbell, unaware of Andrews' withdrawal, only discovered the collapse of the battalion command when his scouts encountered stragglers retreating from the crest. Realizing his flank was exposed and fearing encirclement, he ordered a fallback. C Company remained in position into the early hours, unsure of the wider situation. Captain Johnson, cut off but still in control of his men, eventually received word of the withdrawal and led a silent retreat through the olive groves and dry stream beds around 4:20 a.m., linking up with the 21st Battalion. By dawn on May 21st, no Allied troops remained on Hill 107 or the airfield. The withdrawal was conducted under near total darkness and without covering fire. At first light, Colonel Ramke arrived by transport aircraft and assumed command of the Sturm Regiment survivors. Ramke inherited a fractured regiment. By nightfall, the Sturm Regiment had suffered over 400 killed and hundreds more wounded or missing out of its 1,900-man strength. Many company-grade officers were dead or incapacitated, and units were scattered along the Tavronitis riverbed and the coast west of Hill 107. Ramke's immediate task was to reassemble survivors into 3 coherent Kampfgruppen for perimeter defense and counteroffensive readiness. He quickly reorganized scattered groups into functional units. He ordered the construction of defensive lines along the Tavronitis and ensured his men protected the airstrip against counterattack. Despite limited radio communication and a lack of updated maps, Ramke moved between forward positions personally, rallying squads and designating fallback lines. Simultaneously, Captain Cly conducted a test landing at the western end of Maleme airfield in a Junkers 52. Despite shell fire from New Zealand artillery, his aircraft touched down, unloaded, and took off again. The operation proved that the runway was serviceable. Student, receiving word of the success, immediately authorized the airlift of General Julius Ringel's 5th Mountain Division. Preparations for the airlift began early on May 21st, with airfields in mainland Greece serving as launch points. The first waves included approximately 800 to 850 men, with successive lifts occurring throughout the day. The landings at Maleme began shortly after noon. Junkers 52 approached the airfield in waves, landing under sporadic artillery fire and disgorging their cargo of mountain troops and supplies. Ramke's paratroopers formed a perimeter, shielding the runway from Allied positions to the east. Engineers cleared wrecked gliders and dead aircraft from the strip, while the Germans brought in mortars, machine guns, and even 88mm flak guns to support the defense. By the end of the day, 2 full battalions of the 100th Mountain Regiment, approximately 1,500 to 1,700 German mountain troops, had landed. The tempo of landings was extraordinary. Observers reported aircraft touching down every 70 seconds. Despite Allied shelling and the threat of air attack, the Germans were building a foothold too powerful to dislodge. By the afternoon of May 21st, Freiburg, realizing that German reinforcements were landing at Maleme in growing strength, reversed his defensive stance and ordered a counterattack to recapture the airfield. From his headquarters in Canea, orders were issued hastily, with coordination between frontline units rushed and incomplete. Brigadier James Hargest of the 5th New Zealand Brigade had not yet grasped the scale of the German bridgehead and offered only limited support. Nonetheless, a composite assault force was assembled. The counterattack plan was hastily assembled with the few units still available. The 20th Battalion, reduced to just 360 men, would push west along the coastal road toward the eastern edge of Maleme airfield, supported by 3 Matilda tanks of the 7th Royal Tank Regiment under Lieutenant Roy Ferran. On their left, the 28th Maori Battalion, about 600 strong and drawn from reserve positions near Galatas, was ordered to advance inland through the olive groves and vineyards toward the village of Pyrgos. A third element, the 21st Battalion, only 250 men and staging from southeast of Modi, was to swing northwest in a wide flanking maneuver around Hill 107, striking from the south. Yet the assault faced crippling disadvantages: little artillery support, no air cover, almost no functioning radios, and difficult terrain broken by ravines, stone walls, and cultivated fields. To make matters worse, the Australian 2nd 7th Battalion, scheduled to relieve the exhausted New Zealanders of the 20th before the attack, failed to arrive in time, forcing the depleted unit forward into ground already heavily contested by German paratroopers. The counterattack force, numbering fewer than 900 men and just 3 tanks, would now step off after midnight, under strength, undersupplied, and exhausted from previous days of fighting. Some officers questioned the wisdom of launching a nighttime counterattack with troops who had only just arrived or had marched for hours, but Freiburg, under immense pressure, hoped a sudden blow might recapture the initiative. The counterattack began in the early hours of May the 22nd. The 20th Battalion advanced along the coastal strip under cover of darkness, quickly running into German outposts entrenched in farmhouses and dry riverbeds. Machine gun fire tore through the darkness. The New Zealanders advanced using grenades and bayonets, clearing strong points house by house. Among the attackers was Lieutenant Charles Upham, whose actions during the battle would later earn him the Victoria Cross. He recalled the sheer volume of machine gun fire and the difficulty of maneuvering through the dense terrain. To the south, the 28th Maori Battalion initially met little resistance. Moving through olive groves, they advanced toward Pyrgos. However, they soon encountered dug-in Fallschirmjäger, supported by mortars and captured Bofor's guns. The Maoris fought fiercely, but were halted just short of their objectives. The Maori companies suffered particularly from enfilading fire and fragmentation grenades thrown down from terraces. Attempts to flank German positions failed due to a lack of terrain familiarity. The 3 Matilda tanks supporting the 20th Battalion advanced shortly after midnight along the narrow coastal road toward Maleme. The lead tank was engaged as it approached a small ravine east of the airfield. German paratroopers had positioned a captured Bofor's anti-aircraft gun for direct fire, likely near a vineyard wall or ruined structure. As the tank crested the rise, it was struck at close range, immobilizing it with a penetrating hit to the side armor. The second tank attempted to maneuver off the road to find cover, but became bogged down in a dry stream bed, unable to extricate itself due to the rocky terrain and lack of traction. With limited visibility and no engineer support, recovery was impossible under fire. The third and final tank halted in a covered position, its commander recognizing that pressing forward without infantry coordination or artillery support would risk complete loss. Lieutenant Roy Ferran made the decision to withdraw the remaining tank, citing the exposed terrain, mounting infantry casualties, and the complete loss of surprise. The tank's withdrawal deprived the 20th Battalion of their only heavy firepower, leaving the infantry to press the assault alone against well-dug-in German positions, supported by mortars and machine guns. By dawn, D Company of the 20th Battalion reached the eastern edge of the airfield, but could advance no further. German fire, now coordinated between paratroopers and newly arrived mountain troops, was devastating. Lacking artillery support or air cover, the attackers took shelter in bamboo thickets. A miscommunication between company-level officers led to an unintended fallback. Runners failed to clarify the situation in time, and the attack lost momentum by dawn. By 6 o'clock, the assault had faltered. The counterattack had reached the airfield, but failed to dislodge the defenders. Losses were heavy. More than 100 New Zealand and Maori troops were killed or wounded. With the counterattack repulsed, the Germans solidified their grip on Maleme. Ringel continued expanding the bridgehead. 2 additional battalions of the 5th Mountain Division landed throughout the day. German morale soared. Ramke's troops now turned, captured Beaufort's guns on Allied positions, using them for direct fire support. The 100th Mountain Regiment began pushing east toward Platanias, clashing with elements of the 23rd and 21st Battalions. At the same time, Major Treek's battalion from the 85th Regiment moved inland in an attempt to flank the New Zealand positions from the inland slopes of the Aia Valley, aiming to sever the road to Galatas. However, they ran into stiff resistance from the composite 23rd Battalion, which had regrouped after initial losses and formed defensive lines near the Alikianos river crossings. Resistance was fierce. In the hills around Alikianos and the valleys near Kondomari, Greek troops from the 8th Regiment and armed civilians engaged German patrols with small arms and ambushes. Farmers joined the fight with shotguns and knives, sniping from windows and olive trees. These skirmishes, though small, slowed the German advance. Still, the outcome was no longer in doubt. The loss of Hill 107 had opened the door. Maleme airfield was secure. With it came a lifeline, the ability to land men and material at will. The night of the 21st of May was the last real chance the Allies had to recapture Maleme and alter the course of the battle for Crete. Despite brave efforts, miscommunication, delays, and insufficient strength doomed the counterattack. German forces, initially shattered and demoralized, had recovered and regrouped under Ramke's iron discipline and students' strategic vision. The arrival of Ringel's mountain troops through the now secure airstrip ensured a steady flow of reinforcements. Maleme became not only a victory, but a turning point. With the airfield in German hands, the fate of Crete began to shift irrevocably. As more aircraft descended onto the strip in a near-unbroken rhythm, the defenders of Crete realized that they no longer faced an isolated airborne thrust, but the vanguard of a sustained invasion. Thank you for watching this video. Please leave a like. It really helps out the channel. If there is a topic, battle, or person you would like to know more about, let me know your thoughts in a comment. I would also like to thank all my patrons and channel members for their generous support. If you enjoy House of History and you want to support my work, consider joining me on Patreon. For just $1 per month, you will gain early access to all my videos without any in-video advertisements. Don't forget to subscribe. See you next time.